I'm Jamie O'Kane, CPA, Small Business Advanced Tax Planning and Compliance Extraordinaire, and this is the Abundant Beans Podcast, the podcast that takes my love for learning what makes people tick while digging into the good, bad, and ugly of small business ownership. We strive to give you the insight that only those in the trenches of being and working with entrepreneurs can provide.
We'd like to welcome to the podcast today, Josh
Vaisman, yes. Yeah. No worries.
Josh is a positive psychology practitioner and co-founder of Flourish Veterinary Consulting, which is a really long URL.
It is.
I was typing it in today and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
He served the veterinary industry since 1998 in roles ranging from technician to practice manager to hospital owner. Pulling from a variety of postgraduate certifications in Masters in Applied Positive Psychology, Josh utilizes keynote speaking, workshops, consulting, and coaching services to help veterinary professionals and organizations thrive. Thank you so much for coming.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I have a lot of questions for you.
Awesome sauce.
So what was your first job?
My first job. Ooh, that brings me back. So when I was 15 and I still had to be driven to work, I worked at a Rocky Rococo's Pizza. Are you familiar with Rocky Rococo's Pizza?
That?
Yeah, so this was in Wisconsin. Yeah. So I think it was like a Midwest only chain. Yeah, and so we did full pizzas, but we also did like sliced pizzas. Mm-hmm. And so I was the guy that kind of did like the expoing, cutting up the pies and boxing the slices to put into the little window thing that, you know, that people could go and sell to whoever was coming in. And my favorite part about that job was two things. Number one, we had these like, I don't know, some sort of metal pan that we would like make the cheese bread in. Mm-hmm. And they were a non-stick pan. You would put it through the pizza oven, like the little conveyor thing, right? So I would say, screw the bread. And I would just throw a pile of cheese on it and then put that through. And that would be like my snack, like, you know, a cheese cracker, basically.
Cheese crisp.
Yeah, cheese crisp, exactly. So that was awesome. And then the second thing was at the end of the night, you could be strategic about the slice. Like they had like a system for how many slices you're supposed to make and have stocked at, you know, particular hours of the evening. But you could be strategic about it and make sure that, you know, there might be a couple extra slices by the end of the night. So, you know, I'm a 15, 16-year-old kid, right? So I made sure that there were extra slices and then either they got thrown out or somebody took them home.
So free pizza.
So free pizza, yeah.
15 years old, you're like, I'm going to strategy.
Oh yeah,
Free pizza.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, it was great.
When I waited tables, one of my favorite things was when like somebody would send something back like untouched.
Yeah.
Because then you'd be like, yes, it's mine.
So I worked in restaurants for a while, and I worked with a guy for a bit who he didn't even care if it was touched. If you didn't finish your food and he was your server, some of it was getting eaten in the kitchen. Yeah, it's pretty disgusting.
Oh, man.
He survived. Probably has a very strong immune system.
Yeah, that's a very strong immune system.
Yeah.
Wow. My favorite was when the guys were like, the kitchen line guys were always like flipping their spatulas and it would land on the ground and they just pick it up.
And pick it up and just keep going. Uh-huh. Yeah, back in the day. Yeah.
That was a long time ago. Restaurant to not be named.
Right.
So you've had many roles in the veterinarian space. Tell us about your journey.
Yeah, so I moved out to Colorado in the mid-'90s, and I got a job at a PetSmart in Boulder, and I was working in the specialty department there, so, you know, selling fish and things like that. And we had, in that particular PetSmart, we had a PetSmart Veterinary Services, which doesn't exist anymore. But it used to be that PetSmarts around the country, if they had a vet hospital, it was a PVS, a PetSmart Veterinary Services. And so there was a PVS there. And the guy, the chief of staff there, still a friend to this day, Dr. Donald Davidson Dodge III. Triple D the third. Yeah, third in the line of Triple D is in his family. Amazing. 6'7", about as skinny as that pen over there on that table. Wore a bolo tie to work. Just like a goofy, happy dude. I really adored Dr. Dodge. So, you know, I was a young kid, 18, 19 years old, and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I thought maybe I'd want to go to vet school someday. So I waltzed over to the PetSmart and I said, hey, Donald, I'm thinking I might want to go to vet school. I should probably get some experience in a vet hospital. Can I volunteer here? And he said, no, we don't do that, but I'll hire you. And so within a few weeks, I transferred from the store to the vet hospital, and he trained me to basically be a vet tech or a tech assistant. And so that's how I got my start in the field, is having no experience whatsoever, not really knowing much. And Triple D and Dr. Hanley, who's also still a friend of these days, were the two doctors there, and they taught me how to tech along with the other techs there, and I worked there for several years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So then where did you go? What was your program?
Yeah, so after a while, so we had a pretty close-knit group there, and it was a lot of fun. The job was great. PetSmart ended up selling the PVS brand to a company that at that name was called VetSmart. VetSmart is now Banfield. So VetSmart rebranded to Banfield. They bought all of these, PVSs around the country, and things really changed a lot. And, I wasn't really glued to the place in particular, and Dr. Dodge was sort of looking for the stimulus to go off on his own and start his own vet hospital anyway. So he left and I left and kind of parted ways. And I ended up bouncing around in a few different areas and ended up in another vet hospital in the area working as a tech. And then I wasn't making enough money, which is still a theme to these days for veterinary technicians. Very underpaid demographic as a general population. And so I got a part-time job at a bowling alley. So Fridays I would wake up at 5:30, 6 in the morning. I'd drive down to the vet hospital. I'd work my 10 or 12-hour shift. I'd drive up to the bowling alley. I'd change out of my scrub top into a t-shirt, and then I'd work till 2 in the morning at the bowling alley.
Oh, wow.
So I'm working at this bowling alley, and a few months into this gig, the owner of the bowling alley is like, I don't know how much money you make in this vet thing, but I'd really love for you to come and be my assistant manager here. What would it take? And this just goes to show how good I am at negotiating. And I said, I don't know. What are you offering? And he said, how about $28,000 a year? And I said, how about 30? And he said, sure. And I went, fuck.
I asked for 35.
Yeah. So anyway, so I took that job and I left the vet field and I started managing this bowling alley. And actually it was a lot of fun. It was in many ways one of the most favorite jobs I had. We had roughly 1,500 league bowlers.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of bowlers.
And some of these people would bowl 2, 3, 4 leagues a week, year round. So you get to know these people really, really well. And year over year over year. And so, it felt like a giant family. And then the people I worked with were a lot of fun. And he taught me kind of everything around the bowling alley. I ended up learning, how to do the pro shop thing. So I could measure people's hands and drill bowling balls. And I learned a little bit of the machinery. And so I helped the mechanics and I would work the bar and I was helping with some marketing stuff. And it was a lot of fun. So I was there for quite some time, but it was a challenging job. The owner and general manager was, we'll just say, very different than me. And one day, things came to a head and I ended up getting fired from said bowling alley, which is a story in and of itself. So here I am, unemployed. I dropped out of school for this too. I was in college and I was working at this place, and there was some talk about him starting up a second bowling center, and maybe I'd be a partner there and the general manager and all these opportunities. And I just dedicated everything to this. I literally was in this place probably 65 or 70 hours a week. I was a bowling alley rat. And despite all that, I never really got that good at bowling, which is terrible.
It's one of those things that you can do genetically or you can't.
Right. Yeah. Clearly I don't have the bowling gene.
That's right.
Which is a little disappointing. But anyway, so I got fired from that place. And so now I'm a college dropout and I'm recently unemployed. And had been dating a girl for about a month at this point in time. So she encouraged me to kind of go back to school and to look for some work. And I ended up working in a hotel for a little while I was going through school. But then when I got done with that, now things had gotten serious with her. We're now engaged. And she works a regular day job, and I'm working nights at a hotel. That's not going to work. So I had to find a day job while I figured out what I was going to do next. And lo and behold, a vet hospital in Boulder was hiring a vet tech.
There you go.
So that's how I got back in the field. And I started working there, and about 6-8 months into that job, probably about that amount of time, a vet hospital that I had worked at years prior was sold to 2 veterinarians and a vet tech. And I went, that's interesting.
That's interesting.
Did a little Googling.
I can buy a practice.
Yeah, I had no idea. I mean, I just assumed you're a doctor, you own a vet hospital. If you're not a doctor, you don't, or you can't. And it turns out you can. So I did the waltz again over into the doctor's office, sat down next to one of my favorite docs and said, hey, you want to buy a vet hospital with me? And she said, sure, I've always wanted to own a vet hospital. And I said, great. And I don't think she really thought I was serious. I mean, I'm a tech making like $10 an hour, right?
Until she had a vet hospital, right?
Yeah, 6 months later, we bought a vet hospital. So myself and her and another veterinarian, and that's how I got into management and ownership. So, I started taking all these courses and reading books and finding folks in management, and talking to them and finding a couple people in the area who were non-DVM owners as well and talking to them about their experiences. And yeah, we bought a hospital in South Boulder.
Wow.
So that was right around 2009.
Do you still have the hospital?
No. So we bought this practice and I was there for 5-ish years, right around 5 years, maybe a little more. And it was great. I felt like I was really good at it. We were really good at it as a team. We took this practice. It was a 1-doctor hospital. It had 3 years of consecutive decline in revenue. And we tripled its revenue in about 3.5 years' time.
Wow, that's crazy.
Grew it from a 1-doctor practice to a 4-doctor hospital. And, things were going great. And it was a lot of fun. And I felt like I was really good at it and I wanted more. I got a little greedy, so I wanted more. So I started looking for other opportunities for ownership. And my partners were not interested in multi-hospital ownership, and that's fine. They wanted to do what they wanted to do, and I had different dreams and aspirations at that point in time, so we amicably parted ways. And I sold my equity and took that money and looked for other opportunities. I'd made some friends in the industry during that experience, and had found this guy who I developed a good friendship with, who was buying like what we call no-low practices, or no profit or low profit hospitals with poor cash flow. He was teaching in the schools as well, and so he would get to know these veterinary students who had entrepreneurial aspirations. And they would get together and they would say, okay, great. You want to buy a hospital? Where? Let's find one that's really struggling. I'll help you buy it. I'll help you, manage it while you learn the ropes of being a practitioner. And then I'll teach you the business side, and I'll sell my equity to you in a few years' time, and it'll be your hospital. I said, I want in on that.
Yeah,
So we started looking for other opportunities. We found a hospital up in Cheyenne. That was a good opportunity, and we started negotiating with them. Very, very dysfunctional ownership team, really, really poor hospital culture. So that made it a great opportunity, but it also made it really difficult to negotiate with.
Right.
And there were a lot of stumbles and many, many months of we're almost there, we're not there. We're almost there, we're not there at all. Then we got hooked up with a startup consolidating group. This group, they'd come from Europe. They'd made a bunch of money and road and bridge construction and stuff, and random stuff. Way too young to retire, but full of cash. And so they'd come to the States looking for their next sort of, business venture, settled on the veterinary industry, spent 2 or 3 years kind of researching the field, and then decided it was time to pull the trigger. They wanted to buy veterinary practices and create a consolidating group.
Oh, wow.
They got in touch with us. We all sat down and met. We decided that we would go into a partnership together and buy this hospital in Cheyenne. Now, all of a sudden, what's a negotiation becomes a cash acquisition.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, cash speaks pretty loudly, and that made things a lot smoother. Yeah, so we ended up buying this hospital together. Myself, my friend, this consolidating group.
Oh, my gosh.
They're based in San Francisco. My friend lives in Kentucky. I'm in Firestone,
You're
Colorado. I'm the closest
Cheyenne.
one. So I get to be the guy to be the on-site, practice manager and help turn this practice around. So I started commuting to Cheyenne, Wyoming, 75 miles every single day.
The wind blows really hard.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy. I literally have seen semis on 2 wheels. I mean, it's unbelievable. And then I haven't actually seen them roll over, but I've seen them on the side of the interstate in that commute. Oh yeah, so yeah. So so I started doing that commute every single day. Wake up at 5 in the morning, feed the dogs, feed the cat, feed the birds, feed the fish, feed the wife, feed myself, get in the car, drive 75 miles to work. Spend 10, 12, 14 hours. It was a 7-day-a-week practice, extended hours, only one in the city, and had a lot of problems. And I was going to come in and save the day. Yeah. So not so well. So yeah, I made that commute and worked, my 60, 70, 80 hours a week and, on site, and then whatever I was doing off site. And then my friend started a consulting company, and I was kind of helping him with some of that stuff. And then I ended up becoming a consultant with that company and doing some consulting work. The Consolidating Group, this was their first acquisition. They had aspirations for tons and tons of, hospital purchases. And so I was helping them identify acquisition opportunities, perform some due diligence. I'd travel to some of these places and do some work, either pre or post acquisition with them. I joke with people, I think the math is 168 hours in a week, something like that. I was working about 200 of them. So not at all a sustainable path. And I made it about a year and a half before I literally found myself on a March morning in a blue sweater, standing in front of eggs that I was scrambling, putting the ladle down, and then just like bursting out in uncontrollable tears. Like,
burned out.
Yeah, completely and totally burnt out. Crying my eyes out over scrambled eggs and having no idea why. Literally no idea why. My wife's like, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong with you? Did you hurt yourself?" No, I literally have no idea what's going on. Yeah, complete and total break. So that was my journey through veterinary medicine.
Oh my gosh.
And then, shortly after that, I said, okay, this is not okay. And for me to really kind of figure out the best next path, I had to break away from everything. I needed to really clarify things. And so I left everything. I sold my equity. I left the Consolidating Group. I left the consulting group. I left my position as a practice manager, and I became a 39-year-old unemployed bum. That was awesome.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hung out with the animals all day.
Hung out with the animals all day. Went back to school, started taking classes, reading, doing some certifications online. And it kind of hit me that, the central theme through all of this was my passion for people. And really helping uplift others, really helping them unlock their positive potential, this concept of living an authentic life, and whether that means at home or at work, really kind of started to shine through for me. And then it hit me, this is a problem throughout our industry. What I experience is a very, very small piece of it. And if it can happen to me, somebody who's, kind of a natural optimist, pretty gregarious and happy-go-lucky, it can happen to anybody. And so that's where Flourish came from.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So your current focus is on helping practices foster a positive environment.
Yeah.
So how do you define a positive environment?
So a positive environment for me, that's a great question. Positive environment for me is an environment in which people can feel like they are doing fulfilling work. Fulfilling work means a lot of things. So I think it's helpful to start to clarify what isn't a positive environment. A positive environment is not kumbaya. Right? A positive environment is not everybody's opinion, counts all the time. A positive environment is not hand-holding or back-patting. It's not about, this sort of toxic or false positivity that you see a lot of kind of throughout the world, I think. It's not about entitlement. A positive environment is about helping people fulfill their potential and helping them really feel fulfilled by their work through a sense of meaningfulness. And sometimes that's really hard work. Sometimes meaningful work is really difficult. It can be really stressful, it can be really challenging. And that's no different in veterinary medicine. Some of the things that we encounter in vet med are really, really hard, emotionally difficult, sometimes morally difficult, certainly physically and psychologically difficult. But creating an environment that's focused on what's best in people, focused on building up and leveraging those best components, focused on really helping people fulfill their potential, whether it be within that particular environment or elsewhere, is what I think is a positive workplace. And there's a lot of science that backs that.
So how? I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. I have other questions leading up to that one.
Great.
So how does an organization usually decide to change their culture, and who has to have the buy-in on that?
Yeah, those are great questions. I think organizations decide to change their culture probably in a variety of ways. It's probably pretty unique from organization to organization. I think sometimes, maybe you get a bit of a mutiny, right? People are like, I'm done.
Yeah, we all hate you.
Yeah, we all hate you. This is not working, right? And sometimes that kind of forces it from the bottom up. I think sometimes you get a change in leadership, and maybe the new leadership sees the value and importance of the workplace culture. And so they decide to implement that. Sometimes it's just a moment of inspiration. Sometimes, for me, it was the experience that I had. I thought I was cultivating positive environments in the hospitals that I worked in and that I managed. Mm-hmm. And looking back on it, I really wasn't. I really wasn't doing a very good job of that at all. I needed to have that moment, that experience, to sort of have that awakening of I was not creating that culture, not just for the people, but for myself. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes it can be that too. As far as buy-in, on a sort of global cultural perspective, if you really want to change the culture of an entire organization, you have to have buy-in from the top, and full and complete buy-in from the top. If you don't, it's not going to happen. Some folks in leadership positions sometimes look at these kind of positive cultural changes as a driver for the bottom line. Mm-hmm. And the truth is that when you have a positive culture, yes, it does positively impact the bottom line. Mm-hmm. But that's a result. Mm-hmm. That shouldn't be an end goal. Mm-hmm. And some leaders sort of have that as the end goal in their mind under the mask, the facade of positive cultural change. Listen, human beings are really, really good at seeing through false. Yeah. If you're not authentic in your desire for the culture, people are going to sense that really quickly, and you're not going to have the results. In fact, you could have counterproductive results.
Well, it's really disingenuous.
Totally disingenuous. Yeah, and we sense that.
Yeah.
Pretty quickly.
Yeah, there's a couple of leaders that I've spent some time with that really talk about positive culture, abundance over scarcity, and then they don't live it.
Yes.
And it becomes very, very apparent.
Yep.
Very quickly.
Yep.
And it completely invalidates everything you've ever taught that person.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the piece of research, and it's probably going to escape me, but there's some research that suggests that something like we place as human beings, something like 12 times more value on people's behaviors and actions than their words. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you can talk the talk all day long, but if you're not living it, it doesn't matter. So yeah. Yeah. But that said, within organizations, there are microcultures, right? So even within a small veterinary hospital, and we can take like truly a small practice, 2 doctors, maybe a tech team of 6, 2 or 3 receptionists and a practice manager. There's microcultures within that practice. That tech team, that 6 veterinary technicians, they have their own microculture. And so even if the practice manager or the owner maybe isn't so supportive of, these kind of positive leadership perspectives, within that microculture, they can choose to still bring some of that to the workplace and help enhance it for themselves. So you can still have a positive influence as sort of a foot soldier, if you can get a little bit of buy-in in your own little team.
But if you're going to do the most effective work,
it's got to come from the top. Yep.
So talk to us about some of those advantages of having a workplace that is focused on well-being.
Yeah. So one of the most powerful ones that I like to talk about, there's an economist who just happens to be a hobby social scientist, neuroscientist. His name is Paul Zak. So Paul Zak, he comes at things from an economics perspective, but he studies things like neuropsychology and neuroscience. And he became really fascinated with the neurotransmitter of oxytocin. I'm sure you've heard of oxytocin.
I'm a birth doula. I know all about
Yeah.
all about oxytocin.
And for a long, long time, the assumption was that's really the only purpose that oxytocin served, right? Was birth. Actually, as it turns out, oxytocin is really a neurochemical of well-being, of psychological well-being. So, for example, oxytocin fires up in trusting relationships. So when you and I have a positive interaction that results in a certain level of trust, you get a boost of oxytocin and I get a boost of oxytocin. And the result of that is that it actually boosts our trustworthiness, which creates a stronger relationship, right? So in the workplace, it builds teamwork. When you have increases in oxytocin throughout, the bloodstream of the people in the workplace, teamwork enhances. And then they want to work better together as a team, which further enhances teamwork, right? It's this virtuous kind of upcycle, all from this tiny little chemical in our brains. So he studies oxytocin, and he spent roughly 10 years studying it. He developed a system. I think psychologists or people who study these kinds of things are just fascinating human beings in and of themselves.
Right, just to start with.
Yeah, so he developed a system for measuring oxytocin in the blood real time. So think about that. At work, right? You're sitting at your computer. hey, Jamie, I'm just going to take a quick blood sample and measure your oxytocin real quick. No, just keep working on your spreadsheet. Yeah. Like, I mean, how crazy is that? But he did it. And he got something like 75,000 data points. So, I mean, this is a really, really huge data set. And then he correlated it to a bunch of economic markers. And what he's shown is that within sort of all of the workplaces that he studied, there's basically a bell curve of, sort of oxytocin levels. So there's, the top 25% that have the highest levels of oxytocin within the teams. And then there's the bottom 25%, the two quartiles in between. What he has shown through his research is that an increase in just one quartile. So you could be the worst workplace on the planet from an oxytocin perspective and increase it to just the 25th percentile, almost $11,000 in additional revenue per employee per year.
It's crazy.
That's the impact of a positive workplace culture. That's the impact of workplace well-being. I mean, it's huge amounts of money. So in veterinary medicine, which is where I always kind of fall back on because it's a lot of the work that I do. So the average veterinary hospital, we'll call it 2 doctors. Again, we'll go back to that small practice we talked about a few minutes ago. So 2 doctors producing about $550,000, we'll call it $600,000 in revenue, right, per doctor, total staff of 12. We boost their oxytocin levels by a single quartile. We've doubled their profitability. We've doubled the average vet hospital has about a 10% profitability or 10% EBITDA, right? Yeah. We've doubled it just by boosting oxytocin in their workforce. It's amazing. Yeah. There's real money at the end of it. It's just, I just think it's the result of it. It's when it's the goal. Right. Well, how can I make more money by making people feel good?
No,
that doesn't work.
Feel good.
And then you will make more money.
Reap the benefit
yeah.
Of that. So what are the ways you help a practice build a positive environment?
That's a great question. So a variety of different tools that we use. So there's a lot of concepts that are, again, steeped in science, which is really cool. So we pull from a lot of research. This is not, kind of voodoo magic. This is not, sort of BS stuff that we've made up. We pull from research from social sciences, applied positive psychology, neuropsychology, organizational psychology, things of that nature, things that have actually been proven, evidence-based to work in the workplace and work with human beings. And then we help organizations identify where are the gaps, where are the opportunities, what things can we implement and try? And we basically perform social experiments within the organization. Hey, here are a couple ideas that we think will have a positive impact within this culture. Let's try it and then test it 3-6 months down the road and see what kind of influence it's had.
Are you doing oxytocin blood samples?
Not quite.
Dang
it. Unfortunately, Paul Zach hasn't shared that tool with me. No, but we do use some sort of psychometric-based tools, assessment tools, surveys, things of that nature. But then also interactional tools, right? There's a lot of one-on-one. There's a lot of sort of, leadership coaching, positive leadership coaching, executive style coaching, personal coaching for not just the leadership within a particular practice, but really anybody who could benefit from that kind of coaching. So it's kind of this combination of sort of this discovery component, where we go in and we look at what are we working with, what's actually working really well here, because there's always stuff that's working well. Even in the worst environments, there's always some strength. And so identifying those and bringing those to light, because often we don't even look at those things, right? We're so focused on the shit that's broken that we forget to see the stuff that's working.
That is so true.
Yeah.
I think that's true in any business.
Oh, totally. So we want to help shine some light on those things that are working. And then how can we use those strengths to leverage against the areas of opportunity or the weaknesses or the things that we're maybe not doing so well? And then we offer a whole bunch of tools to do that. And then we kind of help guide along the way. So that's kind of the really extensive, full on 12, 24 month consulting model. A lot of hand-holding, a lot of guidance, a lot of sort of measure, test, remeasure, and a lot of one-on-one. Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some of the biggest obstacles to creating a positive environment in veterinary practices?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So many obstacles. Yeah, so I think the first one is just the human tendency towards a negativity bias, which is not something that we can get rid of. We can't do anything about that. That's built into the part of our brain that evolved many, many millennia ago, right? And we're never going to excise that. And the truth is we really shouldn't. Sometimes you meet somebody, you kind of get that funny feeling. There's a reason for that, and you don't want to eliminate that. Also, if you walk out on the street and you see a 5,000-pound truck barreling at you at 60 miles an hour, you should have the danger response to jump out of the way. Yeah, so we don't want to eliminate that. The problem with that is that negativity bias is way, way stronger than our sort of positivity bias, if you will. Mm-hmm. The good news is that we can cultivate the positivity bias, just like we can go on a diet or start a new exercise regimen to change our physiology and our psychology. We can do the same thing with this sort of leaning into the positive and recognizing that.
Our brain is very malleable.
Yeah, our brain is very malleable, but it takes time and it takes effort and it takes intention. And in the day-to-day, when you walk into the hospital, you're the practice manager, and you walk into the hospital, and 2 of your techs have called in sick, and 3 emergencies have just showed up in your front door, and the anesthesia machine is broken, and you've got a leak in one of the bathrooms. Like, it's really, really hard to be like, okay, I have to practice this instead of this to help support and lead this positive environment that I'm trying to lead. Mm-hmm. So I think just sort of that in and of itself is a big obstacle. The other obstacle, I'll be honest, is most people, when they're looking for a consultant, they're looking for somebody to impact the bottom line. Mm-hmm. And even though I can share some of that data, I can't say, if we change this in your hospital, you will make $100,000 more this year. I can't tell you that. I know it. I know it in my heart that those things will happen over time. And there's so many case studies around it, but I can't go in like a regular operational consultant that can say, oh, wow, the pricing structure on your surgical procedures is way off and you're actually losing money on it. If we just make this adjustment and this tweak, boom, times X number of surgeries per month, you're going to make $75,000, right? I can't do that. And so
you can do that, but that's not what you do.
I can kind of do that. I can't do it with that sort of precision.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's not what I do. And it's just a little bit tougher sell because of that. Also, there's a self-awareness component, and if a culture within an organization is suffering, it means that the people within the organization are not doing everything they can to alleviate that suffering. And that takes a little bit of looking in the mirror, and that can be really difficult for all of us. It was hard for me.
Yeah, I think it is. It's hard for all of us to be like, oh, hey, I am the problem here.
Or at least part of the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I do know, just in my past, that I've had some really bad managers as the people that I emulated.
Yeah.
And then I got in trouble for emulating them.
Yeah.
And then it was just a whole disaster area.
Right.
And I do know what my tendencies are now, because I do know that I do things that aren't positive culture or positive for our culture. So I'll be like, just call me out on these things.
Yeah.
I know it's going to happen. This is just how I was programmed. I'm trying to unprogram that. But if this happens, you have permission to call me out on it.
That's awesome.
And please do that, because
that's great.
I want to be accountable.
Right.
For being a jackass.
Yeah. There's an interesting piece of research. It was done just by survey, and I think 19,000 respondents, something like that. So they spoke to managers within all different organizations, and they asked them to rank. If you had to guess, like employees that have recently left, rank the reasons why you think they left, right? And then employees who had recently left a job, rank the reasons why you actually left that job. So the managers, what do you think they ranked number 1 is why they thought people left their workplace? Money. Yeah. It was number 5 on the employees list. Manager was number 1.
Yes. Manager is number 1.
Yeah.
We've seen that data.
Yeah.
And it's very true.
It's totally true.
It's very true.
I will say this, though. Most of us, the vast majority of us, and I believe this about all human beings, don't wake up in the morning thinking, gosh, I can't wait to get to work today and make things miserable for the people that work for me.
Right.
People just don't do that, right? No. That's not their intention. So I think a lot of times we don't even have the awareness that we're having that impact on the people around us, and that we're actually cultivating a counterproductive culture, that we're actually cultivating an environment different than what we intend. We just don't even realize it. And so that level of self-awareness, we may not even be aware that we need to have that level of self-awareness, And so convincing people of something that they're totally unaware of, that can be a challenge too.
Unexperienced.
Yeah.
So give us a story, or tell us a story of a practice that you helped foster a positive environment and how the practice has changed.
Yeah. So there's a hospital that we've been working with for some time now. And when we joined that practice, it was a year or so after it had changed ownership. So the original proprietor had started and owned the practice for, 15, maybe 20 years, something like that. Built it up into this really, really great, wonderful, successful hospital. 6 doctors on staff, 5 doctors on staff, something like that. And then sold it to one of the associates. And she bought the practice without really having any, business management background, which is pretty typical for our field.
Seems common.
Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful human being, really, really great person, really genuinely cares about the people that work for her, but also now has this, burden and challenge and responsibility for this big business that she's purchased. And so she kind of dove in headfirst to hitting the grindstone and just, I got to make revenue, right? She's a great practice manager who also has a lot of wonderful, wonderful attributes. But through all of this change and all of this kind of focus on keeping things going, the culture started to suffer a little bit, totally unintentionally. To their credit, they recognized that, and they started to look for ways that they can improve that, and they ended up bringing us in. And we went through this process. We had a whole, sort of survey period, and then we spent a week in the hospital. We sat down with every single person that works there and just talked to them about the experience in the workplace. What do you like? What do you not like? Pretty standard stuff, right? And really got a really good image of, from that sort of cultural perspective, from that psychological perspective, what things are working well here and what things aren't. And then we, created this big report and we presented it to the leadership team at the hospital and made a bunch of recommendations and started doing some leadership coaching with them and helping them implement some of the recommendations that they wanted to bring into the practice. And we're actually just about to do our next remeasurement on sort of the workplace culture and the psychological well-being there. But everything that we're hearing and seeing, I fully expect those scores to have gone up by, double digits.
Really
oh my gosh, it's a total change in the environment there. Complete and total change in the environment there.
Practice manager probably sleeps better at night.
Oh, everybody does. Yeah, everybody does. It's unbelievable. And they've hired 2 new doctors since then.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So it really does have an impact. I'll tell you an interesting story. There's a hospital in the Denver area that we do some work with. We do this measurement, workplace well-being survey tool with them every 6 months or so. And the last 2 of them, their scores have been between 20 and 25% higher than the national average. So really on paper, from just a numerical perspective, looks like a really, really good place to work. And so the last time I talked to the practice manager there about her scores, she was like, well, Josh, if all these scores are so good, what do I work on? What do I do with this? And I'm like, first of all, celebrate it. Really, really great job that you're leading this environment that seems to really be fulfilling the people there. That's awesome. Second of all, do you know what the unemployment rate is right now for veterinarians? It's less than 1.5%. It is a highly competitive market. Hospitals are sometimes going years with a constant ad up and they can't find a vet, right? Put this information in your ads. Not only do we pay well and have the greatest benefits and good hours, but we can prove to you that this is actually a really good place to work. Much better than most other veterinary hospitals. That's a competitive advantage right there, right?
And then she'll be more busy because she's got more docs to deal with.
Yeah.
That's what she does.
Yeah.
That's what she needs to do.
Yeah. Exactly.
She sleeps less then again.
Yep.
So you're a busy speaker. You do a lot of keynotes. What are your favorite topics to speak on?
So there's one topic that I do that I have a lot of fun with. I call it breaking happy. It's about sort of reconfiguring our mindset around what well-being really is and finding a more sustainable path. Our country is built on this foundation of the pursuit of happiness, which I think is a wonderful thing. And I'm certainly not advocating for stop trying to be happy. But the problem is that our brain isn't built for constant happiness. And so what the research pretty conclusively shows is that when the pursuit of happiness is the most important thing, when we have it on the top of the hierarchy, we actually have a counter result. There's some research that shows that folks who value the pursuit of happiness over, say, the pursuit of meaningfulness or fulfillment are something have 75% more incidence of depressive symptoms, experience something like 35% more negative emotions. So in trying to find that really great positive emotion, they actually experience more negative emotions.
That's crazy.
Yeah. There's a really fascinating piece of research done in the field of psychology and emotions research, but they actually attributed it to physiological changes as well. And what they found was people who pursued happiness over things like meaning actually experienced a spike in inflammatory markers in the bloodstream, similar to what you would find in people suffering from chronic illnesses like rheumatoid arthritis. So the researchers at the end of the paper basically say, so the pursuit of happiness is about as good for you as chronic illness. So I have this keynote that I do on sort of like breaking down the problems with the pursuit of happiness and sort of offering a little bit of a healthier path and with some evidence-based tools on how to do that.
What does happiness even mean? Right? Does that mean I have 3 Escalades in a hot tub? Like, what does that look like?
Right. Yeah. And there's quite a bit of research around those kinds of things too. You know, it's very common for us to attribute happiness to a particular like achievement or a particular tangible item. I call it the destination dilemma. You set like, if I graduate, then I'll be happy. If I get a job, then I'll be happy. If I get a promotion, then I'll be happy. If I buy that fancy new car, then I'll be happy. If I get the big house, then I'll be happy. And the exact problem with that, why I call it the destination dilemma, is that you have set an achievable destination. So what happens when you achieve it, right? You get a little bit of a dopamine spike, and then you got to go find the next dopamine spike. So there's always something else to do. There's a really fascinating survey done by a positive psychology researcher who I always mess up her last name, Sonia Lumibursky. So she went and she talked to people who made on average about $25,000 a year and said, hey, how much money do you think you need to make to be truly happy? And on average, the response she got was about $50,000. If I could double my salary, I'd be truly happy. So then she went and she found people who made about $100K a year, figuring, well, shit, if it doubles it to get to 50, it must like quadruple it to get to 100K, right? And they said, no, Sonia. If I can make about $250,000 a year, then I think I'd be truly happy. So then she was like, okay, well, let me go look at like the people who just make crazy amounts of money. And she found people who made on average about $1 million a year and asked them, how much money would you need to make to be truly happy? And on average, they said about $3 million. So the point is that like once you achieve these things, you adapt to it. Right. We have this sort of adaptation system built into our neurophysiology and our psychology. You walk into a room that has a bit of an odor to it. At first, you're like, oh, that's interesting. 3 minutes later, you don't recognize it anymore. That's olfactory adaptation.
That's why my son couldn't smell the cheese stick in his that I found in his room.
That's funny.
But we could.
Yeah. There may be one of those in my car, actually.
Yeah. We got a cheese stick.
Yeah. That's a great example. I'm going to use that example in my talk. Thank you.
Yeah. Smelled cheese stick.
Oh, that's awesome.
In his room.
That's awesome.
We do know how long it was in there.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking back to when I was a teenager and maybe went more than a day without showering on occasion.
Yeah, I know.
And yeah, it is bad. We have a friend who their 10-year-old, all summer they had to take him swimming because that was the only way he was going to get bathed. So bad. I know, so bad.
I know, he comes home every day. He's like, hug, and I'm like, shower.
Let me spritz you first.
Yeah. Testosterone.
Yeah. Bad. Yeah. Especially in that growth spurt that's going on. Oh.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah. So no worries. But that's olfactory adaptation, and most people can, kind of relate to that. Mm-hmm. There's psychological adaptation as well. We are not built to have sustainable emotional experiences. Mm-hmm. And so if we're relying on the emotional experience of happiness to get to that and stay there, you can't. You psychologically we adapt. So we can find kind of a higher sense and a more sustainable sense of well-being by shifting our mindset to pursuing things that actually really fulfill us on a psychological level. Right. Looking for contentment, looking for meaningfulness in the things that we do in our life, in the work that we do. And we can train our brain we can create new neural connections to actually start to see all of the positive things that already exist. The fact that you and I are sitting here, right? It's one temperature outside and another temperature in here. That's a really amazing positive thing, right? Yeah.
So cool.
Oh my God, it's amazing. But
It can affect our environment.
yeah, right? But every day we go through that and don't recognize it, right? And I'm not saying that makes us
too hot.
Yeah.
And we're like, ugh.
That's when we recognize it, right? When something goes wrong.
When we're uncomfortable.
Yeah. So we can train our brain to start to see all of those things on a more regular basis and lean more into the positive. And then before you know it, you start to reach these sort of higher levels of psychological well-being. And there's all sorts of amazing benefits that come with that, even outside of the workplace, right? Just for you as an individual, including things like longevity and being ill less and things like that.
Not getting that 4-week cold
Right. Yeah.
that the kids brought home.
Well,
Yeah.
there might not be a remedy to the illnesses that kids transfer to us.
They go to the petri dishes and then they come back.
I really think that they do roll around, and like my dog goes out and rolls around and who knows what.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that teenagers do that too.
Yeah. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I'm like, shower yourself. Don't touch me.
Yeah.
So, where are you speaking next?
So I'm next week. I'm doing a gig in San Jose. Yeah, I'm super pumped about that. And then I think the week after that, I'm speaking at the VHMA convention down in Phoenix. I don't know. After that, I can't remember.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited for you.
Thanks.
So, before I ask my last question,
Yeah.
What is the easiest way for people to find you?
Yeah, so online at the website, www.flourishveterinaryconsulting.com.
You have to spell veterinary properly.
Yes.
And consulting.
Yes,
That
and
was a hard time
yes,
for me.
yes, unfortunately. I know. I should just change it to FVL.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll link it and then just
Or
put some boxes. Y'all can just click on it.
Somebody had flourish.com, so I can't afford to buy that.
That
But
would
yeah,
be an expensive one.
that would be an expensive one. So Flourish Veterinary Consulting or just flourishveterinary.com works as well. Okay. Or they can email me at josh@flourishveterinaryconsulting.com. Find me on LinkedIn as well.
Okay, cool. And again, we'll link all that stuff. Put it in
Awesome.
boxes. People can
Awesome.
hit it up there.
Rock and roll.
Okay, so final question.
Yes.
What is the one thing business owners can do today to start fostering a better environment in their organization?
Awesome question. So I think every single organization has maybe not formal values, but values, right? Things that are important to them, things that they really value, and behaviors that they want to see, positive behaviors they want to see in the people that they lead. And there's a really, really great tool called the SBI tool that anybody can use at any point in time. I mean, you can just use it in life in general. You can use it as a parent or as a friend or whatever, even just shopping in the grocery store. So SBI stands for situation, behavior, and impact. So, I thought I was doing a really good job when I was a manager. At the end of every day, I'd walk around the hospital and find every employee and say, hey, thanks for your work today. And the first 1 or 2 times I did that, I think that it had an impact on them. But after doing that for a year and a half, every single day, psychological adaptation, they're like, yeah, okay, whatever. Well, you don't even know what I did today. Right? So SBI allows you to make it a lot more impactful. So situation, hey, Jamie, when I came in and you offered to get me something to drink, behavior, right? You offered to get me something to drink. Thank you so much. That really made me feel welcome and warm here and really helped calm my nerves. That's SBI in action. And any leader can do that. Find 3 opportunities every day to do that with 3 different people on your team. And I guarantee you within a week's time, you'll start to feel an actual difference in the culture there.
I love that. Cool. So it's called, what's it, SBI?
SBI, situation, behavior, impact. So what was the situation? When, where it happened, whatever. What was the exact behavior that you witnessed objectively? Don't try and put meaning behind it, just what they actually did, and then the impact that it had. That's it. Whether on you or somebody else or the team or a client, irrelevant.
Perfect. That's easy.
Yeah.
That's really easy.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Fun.
Yeah.
Could have done this all day.
Well, I can't shut up, so that's part of the problem.
I loved it.
Thank you so much for listening or watching. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, or wherever you prefer to listen. If you learned something and found some useful information to apply to your business today, please consider giving us a thumbs up and a review. Until next week, be abundant.